I'm with Michael Connert of Vizsla Silver this morning. VZLA is the symbol on both the TSX and the NYSE, American. Michael, good morning, and how are you?
Hey, Robert, good to see you. I'm doing really well. As you can see behind me, it's one of these rare sunny days in Vancouver during the winter, so things are good.
Yeah, it's good. It's good weather here in Phoenix too, so that's fantastic, all up and down the West Coast. Um, I've followed Vizsla since the early days, I believe.
Yeah.
The first time I wrote about it, commented on it was October 2019, if I'm not mistaken. And I recall like that first year, what a wild year that was from 2019, then March 2020, the world changed and we had no idea what was happening. And 2020 was a great year for Vizsla, a really transformative year where you must have gone through a roller coaster. So I wanna get into going back in time 5 years ago, and then we'll come to the present day and what's next for the company, how you make it $1 billion or $2 billion company. But let's go back to 2019. So, how did the company start? How did you find this asset, this exceptional silver asset in Mexico?
Well, it actually all kind of goes back to 2017, and I'd always tried was working on deals in the space here. I was always really kind of fascinated and obsessed with the mining space, so I decided to start a company, a junior mining company, and IPO it basically as an acquisition vehicle for projects like Panuco. So, the story actually started in 2017 with a private company called Vizsla Resources. If you fast forward to 2019, early 2019, Craig and I were introduced to this district here in Sinaloa, Mexico, through someone that we had done business with historically, and they had a great experience working with us on our previous deal. They said, Mike, you have to look at this district in Mexico. It looks a lot like, at the time Silvercrest was doing really well. And, I knew even though it was a difficult market, there was still traction for these high grade silver stories. So I was pretty fascinated by the idea when we first came across it. So I remember where we were. I was in Toronto on a work trip and having dinner with somebody. And I remember getting this deck sent to me that Friday, looking at it kind of briefly over dinner and thinking, wow, this looks good. And, by that following Monday or Tuesday, we were on a plane to Mazatlan, to Sinaloa, to look at the project. Didn't take long at all to assess that this was a monster district. We drove through these road cuts and we saw all this huge hydrothermal activity happening, and huge evidence of a big system there. Plus, the dozens and dozens of underground mines, the great infrastructure, all of these things really kind of came together. Really on that first site visit that led us to be confident to acquire the project. So that was early 2019. The person that was working on the project at that time made it sound like it was basically just ready to kind of sign up and do the deal, and that would be easy, and that wasn't the case. It took the rest of that year, basically till the fall and really beyond, to get everything lined up. So it took the better part of a year working with the various families in this region that had controlled the district for 2 decades prior. And at the end of the year, we were able to kind of lock all that up, which was incredible. But that was kind of the start of the problem, which was, and you'll remember this, a lot of people were critical of the deal. We were like a 15 million, $10 million, maybe at some, on a good day, $20 million Canadian junior company with, previously just a copper asset in BC. It wasn't anything special. And no real track record in Vizsla of raising any money, but we were on the hook for $43 million US once we started that option. And we had a few years to make those payments, but it was, that was kind of the uphill battle that we had. We were confident that if we raised enough money and we're going to be able to drill enough holes, we were going to hit something spectacular. And because of the infrastructure, because of the mill that we owned, if we exercised the option, there was going to be the ability to mine what we found. We knew that was going to be possible, but the big hurdle was, how do we convince the market that, you know, this little junior is going to be able to, first of all, make that discovery and then pay that $43 million US. And as you said, 2020 was a game changer for us. In basically first half of 2020, we made a major discovery. That discovery was probably the highest grade discovery in decades in Mexico and silver, and it sent the stock running. You know, we raised money on the IPO at 15 cents. We hit a high of $3.50. You know, within basically a few months of that discovery hole, which was incredible.
Yeah,
So
I want to ask you about that. So, I recall 2019 started really well for Vizsla. I think your share price almost got to $1 at one point. 2020 started well. I remember I was at VRIC Vancouver, January 2020. Spirits were high. It seemed not like an optimistic time. And then February, March happened, and I just want to know, like, what did it feel like to be in your shoes? You started this company, you got this incredible asset. Yeah, as you said, the option payments were quite daunting for an early stage junior, but you knew the quality of the asset, and things are starting well. The market appreciates the quality of the story and the vision of the company, and then COVID happens. How did that feel, and what did you do?
well, it was it was kind of like wandering around blind, you know, and hoping for the best. It was it was pretty it was a pretty hairy time, I suppose. And what I didn't mention before is, you know, all those trips to Mexico to kind of get that deal done. You know, my wife was pregnant, and you know, by the time we actually closed the deal, we had our first child. So, you know, I was kind of a new father, and you know, my only job was Vizsla. You know, that was the only, you know, I mean, it only started to become an income at a certain point, because I was, you know, I was basically I think it was about $250,000 in debt to the company, basically, or the company owed me for what I was running it off my credit card for the first year or so. So I was in kind of a bit of a, I wouldn't say precarious, but you know, it was more risky than it probably should have been, you know, early on in those days. So it was kind of sink or swim. It was all in on Panuco. So, you know, you're right. It did really well. That first year we went from that 15 cents, I think it was like 95 cents or something like that, all on speculation, all on really great marketing and getting the word out. And it was an exciting story. It was this historic district, of course, you know, consolidated for the very first time, high grade, et cetera, et cetera. So we were really excited. You know, everything was going great that on that first run up. And then, of course, had a few failed holes, and, you know, it wasn't immediate exploration success. And the stock really started to collapse. And then, of course, COVID, it was kind of like a free fall. It was quite a remarkable time. But, you know, the comfort there was that we were all going through it at the same time, right? It was, you know, no one really knew what was going on. We were watching these reports out of China, and, you know,
I remember that.
you think, okay, well, this might be the apocalypse. Like, we don't know, right?
Yeah, what an insane time. And just looking at the Vizsla chart, so the stock crashes along with every other junior, every other stock basically in the market in March. And then things start to turn around in April. A little bit it's not quite as dire, it seems. And then you're back out drilling in May at the project. And then I'm just pulling up the news release. It was June 24th, 2020. You announce 1,544 grams per ton silver equivalent over 8.2 meters in a new discovery at the Panuco project, Mexico. And that was the whiskey bottle into the shot glass. That was just like what the market wanted to see that summer, as gold and silver rose aggressively, as the Fed poured trillions and the government poured trillions around the world into the economy and markets. And I think the Vizsla 2020 story is what junior mining speculation is all about. I mean, to go from whatever it was, 25 cents at the low to 250 or almost $3 at the high in a matter of months is just a phenomenal turnaround. What an incredible rise. And how did that feel?
Well, and that was one of the best. I mean, probably the best weeks of my life. It was just incredible. We it's the most incredible feeling, that discovery, because it's you put everything into something, and then it the best case happens, which was spectacular. And then following that initial discovery hole, we put on another hole that was I think 6 meters at 8 kilos, 8.1 kilos, that was really the barn burner. And once we put that out, we raised $30 million from Franklin Templeton, Eric Sprott, and For Sale, basically a three-party financing. Prior to that, it was we were trying to make anything work on the financing side. But one of the things that we did was we marketed the stock heavily as well too. So there was a lot of eyes on it. There was people who were shorting the stock as well. So part of that rally was a short covering rally as well, which with that actually felt incredible, right? Burning the shorts on a deal where highly criticized and all these things. So it felt great. And then I'm sure we'll cover it, but like going from that huge risk of putting up, basically gambling, putting all your eggs in one basket, to now today, I just came back from the project, and we've broken ground on the test mine. We're really going to become a mining company in a few short years here. That's the rarest of things in the junior mining space. So it's been an incredible story for us.
A lot has happened, between June 2020 and, now. It's been over 4 years. A lot has happened. The company has drilled aggressively, expanded the resource to, I want to say are you about 300 million ounces of, silver equivalent at this point?
Yeah, 325. And
325.
growing. So we're going to put a new resource out in probably the first couple of weeks of January.
Wow, fantastic. So one of the biggest silver, deposits, I'm not sure if it's exactly silver primary, but it's over half silver, silver and gold, very high grade, some really just extraordinary veins. I mean, it, I've seen a lot of silver projects around the world, and I see a lot of companies, they drill, zero point 0.7 meters of 500 grams per ton silver, or maybe, if they're lucky, they get like 1.3 meters of 500 grams or 600 grams. But uh, at Vizsla, you've drilled some incredibly wide veins. So some of the veins are very thick, very well endowed, and many are close to surface. And since you acquired the project, you've made new discoveries. I mean, this is a Mexican vein field. I mean, it's a poster child for what a silver and gold vein field looks like.
Yeah, exactly. And that's more and more now we're realizing. And of course, I had these thoughts early on, but it's starting to be more and more confirmed. But it feels like we've gotten to a time machine and gone back to the Fresnillo district a couple hundred years ago, and have first pick at grabbing other properties in this area, because we've tripled our land package this past year as well. So you're right. This is a classic epithermal Mexican vein field. It's a 1 billion ounce district, I believe. We've got 325 million ounces of silver equivalent here. It's the world's largest undeveloped high grade. The qualifier there is the high grade, but high grade silver resource. And of course, it's growing. And that's just on 5% of the veins in the western portion of the property. The backbone of that is Copala. Copala is on average 10 meters thick, so 30 feet thick. Average grade is over 20 ounces silver equivalent, so 600 plus grams silver equivalent. That's extremely high grade, and we are silver primary. It's about 60-40 silver gold. It's only precious metals. There's a bit of base metals, but we're not going to process them. And then this Copala vein runs for a mile long, and it's open in each direction. So we haven't even finished that off yet. All of the veins that are in our resource are open laterally. and at depth, but not at surface because, or not up because it's basically they're all at surface, right? So we've gone from surface down and found these incredible resources. But you know, we are drilling now with 2 rigs. We have 2 rigs turning 24 hours a day on potential new discoveries elsewhere in the district. And what we want to do as we develop the West, if we put out this industry leading PEA, that's going to be a mine. We're going to push this forward. But as we do that, we want to show that there's the ability to make new big discoveries all the way, outside of that PEA area into other areas of the district and beyond. So we believe that in due time, it's one of our goals that we want to show that this is a 1 billion ounce district.
Before we get into where the company is going next, I want to talk about a little bit of CEO corporate strategy. So one thing I've noticed about Vizsla over the years is you never let the treasury run low. You've always managed, I mean, even the early days, I mean, maybe it got to 3 million or 4 million, but it never got to like 300,000.
No.
And you just did a $65 million financing a couple of months ago. And, at first, I think some people are like, oh, the stock's breaking out, and they do a financing. It cooled it off, a bit, but also the silver price pulled back. So, it wasn't just the financing that, that cooled the share price off. But I think that's very important for investors to understand why financing and making sure the company has ample cash and runway for more than 12 months is so important for shareholder value, because if you let it run too low, there is a lot of risk there, and then you might be stuck financing on bad terms, and we see a lot of juniors doing that. So just talk a little bit about sort of the strategy of financing and making sure you're always doing it on your terms.
Well, that's my worst nightmare, is to be backed into a corner and have to be a term taker, or have to basically be at the whim of the investors, because it's a very dangerous place to be. When you have a strong treasury, you can basically have all the optionality on when you want to raise money, how you want to spend that money. If you get backed into a corner and you have 200,000, 300,000, even $1 million in the case of Vizsla in the bank, you're desperate, and you have to take, you have to basically take those terms that are offered. And whether it's someone might come to you with a convertible and force you into this convertible because you can't raise equity because the market's not there for it, yada yada. It's just a terrible place to be. And we've been in that situation once here in Vizsla, and I promise never to have that happen again. So you'll always see us making sure that the treasury is full so that we can execute our goals. And that's a very important thing to do. So we raised this money. So we did the 65. We actually got the green shoe done on that as well too. So it's like 75 million Canadian. Then we did a cross from our treasury to a very, very, very strong institutional shareholder at over $3 Canadian. So we've raised about, what would that have been? So it's about 80 something million dollars in the last few months. And our treasury now, plus we had the warrants come in. We've been getting EVA back from the Mexican government. We've got about 130 million dollars Canadian in the bank right now, which covers us certainly from where we are today through to the feasibility, through to a construction decision, but also covers part of the CapEx. Now, when we are looking to go raise more money in the future, we can confidently say, if someone's watching the stock and saying, okay, well, they're going to have to finance, when they put the feasibility study out, they're going to have to do equity because they have to finance, they're going to run out of money by the time to get the feasibility study. Well, that's not the case for us. So people can't, wait for us basically to raise money on a particular date or on a particular milestone, because we have a very strong treasury, and we'll continue to do that. We'll look to opportunities to raise money. And if you're an investor and you want your management team to be doing this and thinking about this, because there's nothing worse than a company in a free fall being pushed into a corner and having to accept terms that they don't want. So now on the last financing, we did that. You're right. I remember some commentary around the timing of it. Looked like silver was going to go for a run. Vizsla was breaking out. It was doing really well. There's a couple of really good reasons why we raised money there. One, we were already in Colorado talking to all of our investors. We were basically at a 52-week high. We raised, I think, within 7% of a 52-week high, which is incredible, at a very, very minimal discount. And we were able to bring in some very, very strong shareholders. So it made a lot of sense for us to do that at that point. Now we're in a position where we don't have to raise money, until we put out some major milestones like the updated resource, the test mine being underway, feasibility study, probably project finance debt we'll have before we have to raise equity again. So we're in a really good position financially.
Yeah, I mean, so that financing, I mean, look, if I'm a day trader and the stock's at 290 and it's breaking out, and then I see the company announce a 260 bought deal, obviously I'm not happy, but you're not appeasing day traders. You're focused on the long term and your long-term shareholders, which is what matters. And so to be able to get $70 million in the door with no warrants within 7% of a 52-week high, I mean, I can count the number of junior mining companies on one hand that could pull something off, like that. So I think that, that should not be lost on investors, in the sector, that was a good financing. It may not have made people happy that day or, that week, but, when you look at it in the big picture, you raised from strength, as you always try to do. And the terms of that were actually, very good. And I think the stock is still trading around that 260 to, 255, share price. And silver and gold have been pretty volatile the last few months. We had a pretty strong downdraft there following the election in the US, and the share price, did not fall through support, and, if you look at the Vizsla chart long term, it's kind of interesting because I'm kind of interested in your thoughts on where you are in the mining life cycle, because obviously you had that extraordinary lift in 2020. You actually even got even more tailwinds in 2021. The sector had a very rough 2022, and obviously you weren't excluded from that rough year, but still, even at the worst of it, when silver was really down and out, gold was testing 1625 support there for a few months in late 2022, you never really fell under $1.20, $1.30 a share on the TSXV. So there's a very clear support level that held on multiple tests, no matter what was happening with gold and silver or how negative the sentiment got. And I think the fact that you always kept the treasury strong, served the company well during some of those tough times in 2022 and 2023. So where do you think the company is now in the life cycle?
Well, it's funny because it feels like we've been in, of course, as I mentioned, started in 2017 with Vizsla. So, it doesn't feel like that long. It feels like we've almost just gotten started here. And, I think the best days, are certainly ahead of us. So in terms of the mining life cycle, if you go back and look at Silvercrest and other silver developers, but Silvercrest is probably the best analog to what we're doing. The next year that we have, which is an updated resource with higher confidence categories measured and indicated, feasibility study, test mining starting, discovery drilling, all these things that we're doing at probably the best risk adjusted time in the company's history because of the treasury and things like that. These are things that create a huge amount of value for companies like ours. So, the kind of our secret sauce to this as well is having Simon Smirlik, who's our COO, join us this year. Simon's built 40 mines plus with his career at Ausenco. One of the most recent ones he did was actually Las Chispas for Silvercrest. They built it on a lump sum turnkey basis. So Simon knows how to do this, and he's not even really behind the scenes because he's talking to the market about this a lot, but he's got the team working incredibly well, driving towards these goals, and primarily the goal of production in 2027. So this is what they call the golden sidewalk, where, well, we're on the we're on the edge of the golden sidewalk. I think when we're fully funded and permitted, of course, that's where we're going to be in that golden sidewalk where you're basically going into production. But as far as de-risking goes, I think, you know, we're very close to getting into that mode there, and I think that the market probably underestimates how close we are to that. So that's where we're going to surprise people. I think next year is going to be really fun to put out results from the test mine, progress from the test mine, of course, which we've already broken ground on. I suspect that because we have a project that is past producing, because we've selected the mill site and the mine site all on site previously disturbed land, that I think permitting is going to be easier for us than it has been for other Mexican companies. So I think there's a world in which Vizsla, I'm not saying that this is guaranteed or it's going to happen, but I think there's a world in which Vizsla could be fully financed and permitted next year, and then breaking ground in 2026 and moving onward. So that's certainly a forward-looking statement. Again, it's not company guidance that that'll happen, but I think it's a possibility. And if that's the case, you know, we'll be producing twice as much as Silvercrest, and they just got bought out for, you know, an incredible amount there. And so it's pretty easy to actually figure out where Vizsla could go from here, and it's much higher.
So yeah, let's unpack that a little bit. So, you know, let's say ballpark, you know, in the US, the company's current market cap is around 600 million. So let's say you said 325 million silver equivalent, high grade. That's a key point, high grade. It's probably going to get bigger. You know, we'll see. I'm betting it's going to get bigger. So just ballpark from my perspective as an investor, let's say 400 million, you know, silver equivalent ounces, high grade. Usually in the US, those ounces go for $3 per ounce of silver in the ground. So that would get me to around $1 billion to 1.2 billion valuation potential. So maybe 2x upside from here. How do you demonstrate that to the market and get it to $1 billion? Like, what are the key milestones that you have to achieve?
Well, I think, you know, that's one way to look at it, and that's I think a pit stop along the way to production. I do think that, you know, certainly we deserve $1 billion market cap today. I think we're undervalued. I think there's $1 billion of value today, and that's based on, you know, probably the PEA economics. So we've got a $1.1 billion NPV based on the numbers that we published, you know, the metal prices that we published, the PEA that date. But if you look at today's metal prices, it's actually a 1.5+ billion dollar NPV with a triple digit IRR. So I think because of the quality of the asset, the NPV to capex ratio, et cetera, you know, deserves a premium. But even if it doesn't have a premium, say you're at 0.6, 0.7 NAV, today's metal prices, we're $1 billion company, in my opinion. But if you look at it on a dollar per ounce basis, we get to that 400 mark, or 350 to 400 in that range there. You know, certainly, you know, that's actually a pretty reasonable price, $3. I mean, I've seen Silvercrest be valued at over $10 EV per ounce in the past. If we're going into a silver market like we saw in the last 5 years at certain periods of time, I think, you know, $5 to $10 EV per ounce is fair. But even at $3, that shows a double, right? So there's a lot of ways to cut it, but I think probably the best way is to look at what our future cash flow is going to be. And, you know, the PEA that we put out was a moment in time. It doesn't have the optimized mine plan that we're going to have here. It doesn't have the upgraded resource. It doesn't have the new high grade ounces that are going into the resource. So, but let's just use that 250 million free cash flow post tax in the first year, and it's basically average about north of 200 million per annum free cash flow. If you look at what Gatos went for on an acquisition, it's about 15 times free cash flow, and Silvercrest was about 6 or 7 times. So if you meet in the middle, let's say 10, you know, you're talking about a $2 billion, and this is on the PEA numbers, a $2 billion, you know, basically valuation based on cash flow US. So that's, what would that be? That's, you know, 3.5 times where we are right now. Now, that's not counting in any growth that we've done here with this drilling, the work that we've done, the exploration. It's not counting in any new discoveries that we may make. And of course, we have 2 rigs turning right now across the project, and that's at current metal prices. I think what we're going to see is likely much higher silver going forward as well. Higher silver prices, higher gold prices. So you have basically a really clear line to multiple times re-rating based on just the simple things that we're doing that we're basically funded to do going forward. And then you have, the upside of drilling and discovery can create a huge amount of value. And, you look at companies like Lundin Gold, they're getting rewarded for this. Snowline's getting rewarded for discoveries. Founders is getting rewarded for discoveries. And all of these are on a big district scale. So I think having the district upside that we have at Panuco helps with that. But also, there is the real serious potential for, much higher prices. And at that case, it's really just thinking about, our lowest quartile ASIC, which is sub $8 actually for the first couple of years. It's less than $8 ASIC. And if you look at kind of the ability for that margin to grow with increased silver prices, it gets pretty exciting for shareholders as we move along.
Yeah, I mean, I just looking at your slide on potential catalysts over the next 12 months, and actually, yeah, this is actually a pretty exciting set of catalysts. So, bulk sample test mine program with the results of that to feed into the feasibility study by the end of 2025. So, the bulk sample test mine, is that starting right now?
Yes, that's exactly right. So we started the earthwork, basically stripping the soil off of the box cut, the initial portal, and we should be probably doing our first blast in the new year, early new year.
Okay, so that's a big milestone that will definitely get some attention when you put out, the results of that. And then a updated resource estimate. You said Q1?
That's right. It should be early new year, I would say.
Okay. And then the big one, well, you sort of teased a potential permit, but the feasibility study by the end of 2025. So that could be quite a 1-2 punch, putting out the feasibility study at the same time that you receive a permit.
Yeah, exactly. And very similar again to that Silvercrest playbook. And it's, we reference it because it was done very, very, it's almost like a perfect execution. And it's such a good analog to what we're doing. But, they basically were able to come out with a feasibility study, permits and project finance all in one go. And that was really, an incredible time to be a Silvercrest shareholder. So, we want to replicate that in our own way, of course. The only outstanding thing is permits. But what I think, based on my meetings with the Mexican government over the last few weeks and months, the new administration, I think what will probably end up happening is companies that already have submitted permits in Mexico may see their permits being granted. And if that happens, I think there's just going to be a huge flood of capital into Mexican developers. And I think, probably the time to buy them is now, right? Is pre, positive news on permitting.
Yeah, so that's an important point. And I think that is clearly based upon, my analysis and, what I hear. That's why Vizsla is trading at this, I guess, cheaper, attractive, valuation for those that, appreciate the opportunity and can see those permits, arriving. Just tell us a little bit about, Mexico, the new administration. I hear all different. Talk to one CEO, they say one thing. Talk to another CEO, they say another thing. Talk to an investor, so I get all different sorts of opinions on Mexico. It is the silver mining country in the world. I don't think that's changing anytime soon. So, tell us, what your thoughts are on this new administration.
Well, I think the best way to put this is I think when Claudia speaks about mining and Canadian miners, the president of Mexico, she basically ponders why it looks like some Canadian companies come in and operate under rules in Mexico that they wouldn't operate under in Canada. So she wants parity across basically operating standards and basically duty of care in Mexico, which I think is actually pretty fair. You wouldn't like it if some companies from another country come into your backyard and don't operate at the same standards that they do in other countries. It's just not the right way to do it. So there is a desire for them to have permitting and the mining industry kind of meet, I think, the rest of North America, Canada, and the US in various standards. But I do believe that they understand the importance of mining more than the AMLO administration. And part of that was recently she came out and said that the open pit ban needs a review. She didn't say, oh, it's the right thing to do. She said it needs to be reviewed and changed. So I think there's going to be improvements to that open pit ban. I think there's going to be some caveats, and probably the caveat around that will be critical minerals. It's the first time I've heard the Mexican government talk about critical minerals in the context of silver and copper. So it does seem to me like they're gearing up for making mining, but sustainable mining, a bigger part of the industry, and starting to kind of improve the sentiment there. That's basically been the messaging that I've been receiving, both explicitly and then also through my friends who know Claudia and know the administration there in Mexico. So that would be let's say positive for a company that had this say a big open pit in Mexico in a virgin area, and there's no other mines around, and it's dry, and there's water issues and all these things. But for Vizsla, it's always been a really straightforward approach to permitting, because we have 450 years of mining history in this district here. We're actually using an old adit area to get into this new test mine area. So wherever we can, and I would say about 95% of the impact that we're making in terms of disturbances to the ground and things like that at Panuco is done on previously disturbed land, whether it's disturbed by agriculture or mining. So it's looked on more favorably. And we're getting most of our water ideally going forward from underground sources and from rainwater capture, which is very important. Mazatlan and Panuco and Concordia are all very wet areas, so you get a lot of water there. Water isn't really a major concern. That's been a big concern of that administration. So, of course, it's my job to be bullish about permitting and things like that in Mexico. We can't pick up all that silver and gold and take it somewhere else, but I also wouldn't want to, because I do think it's probably the only place that you can have these big deposits in the world that you can actually go from discovery into production in 8 years, and that's kind of the average time frame, even under the AMLO administration, for projects to go from discovery to production in Mexico. So I think it's going to be very positive for us.
So your sense is that permits could start to flow in the new year?
I do think so. I think we'll start to see some. I already know that they have been approving some MIAs in Sinaloa. I think they were private companies. When I last met with them, I guess late November, they said that they had approved 4 permits in Sinaloa. Maybe not big headline ones, but nonetheless. Still positive momentum. And I think it's just a matter of time before some of these that are in the queue get approved, and those will be ones that are more front and center in investors' view, which I think will at that point, I could just imagine there'd be a huge flow of capital into developers, because there's basically a sign that says Mexico is open for business.
And how many jobs would this future mine employ?
So it's basically between 600 and 1,000 in total. During that time, during construction, it's about 300 to 400 as well. So it's a pretty sizable operation. And to this date, we've employed upwards of 250 people at the project at various times. When we had the 13 rigs turning, we had over 200 people there. And in meetings with the Secretary of Economy of Sinaloa, they pulled out a chart and said, actually, Vizsla has created the most high-paying new jobs in any municipality all throughout Sinaloa. So we're getting recognition for that as well. But it's a huge driver in terms of direct jobs, but in terms of indirect benefits to the community, it's even bigger, because I think we're probably one of the only companies that's out there in any industry that's spending $224 million on CapEx and, tens of millions of dollars a year on sustaining capital and things like that, which, obviously goes into the industry and into the economy of the local area.
Yeah, that's impressive. Yeah, that's a big economic, impact. Final question, Mike, and maybe a tricky one to answer, but I'm going to throw it at you anyway. So you obviously talk to a lot of corporates, you talk to funds, you talk to high net worth investors. What's your sense for the catalyst that's going to put a takeover bid on the table? I mean, this is an extraordinarily special asset. You just don't get silver deposits of this scale, of this grade, in a good location very often in 2024. So will it be, the receipt of a permit? Will it be the feasibility study? What's your sense?
Well, I think if we wanted to sell it already, we certainly could have. Our desire is to drive this forward, build this mine, and if someone really needs to own this, they're going to have to pay us an incredible amount of money to take it off our hands, because it's actually the kind of asset that is a cornerstone asset for basically any company, aside from the super big majors. They would turn them into something very special. So we have this asset already. We own it. We've done the hard work. We made the discovery. Our intention is to become the world's largest single asset silver primary producer through this asset. And that's not just because we want to keep our jobs or we're entrenched or anything like that. It's actually the best thing for the shareholders. If you look at a PNAV multiple and if you look at cash flow multiples, it's very important for us to take this all the way into production. So, I don't know if that's the answer that you're looking for. I think, you're right in terms of kind of the broader M&A scenario right now. It looks like corporates are looking for production. If you look at the last two transactions in silver, it's been Gatos and Silvercrest, and of course those are de-risk producing. They've kind of got all the kinks out of the system and made it a pretty seamless and natural transaction for bigger producing companies that actually needed that cash flow and needed that profile for various reasons. But I think the preference of corp dev teams of bigger companies these days is to go for production. But I do think that we're going to start to see some interesting stuff happen now that the Newmont portfolio is being digested. So, we saw SSR take the Cripple Creek, and we saw some other transactions happening recently. And that's going to take up a bit of bandwidth, or that's going to free up, I should say, a bit of bandwidth for various corp dev teams. So I think you might start to see transactions happening further down the line, whether it's feasibility or fully funded, shovel ready, that type of thing. But it's an interesting time. You don't have this crazy exuberance where discovery, even companies like Founders and Snowline, right? You saw B2 take an equity position there. Why not just take it over? It's because I think there's criticism these days still, from the investment community on doing too early of a takeover, right? Too quick or too early of a takeover. So it seems to me it's all kind of a little bit further down the life cycle these days.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right about that. They'd rather wait and see the junior advance it a little further and then come in and pay a higher price if they have to. But that's the strategy. Mike, thank you so much for your time, and have a great holidays, and hopefully I'll see you in Vancouver in January. Cheers.
Yes, sounds good. Thanks, Robert. Appreciate it.